What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. We're back at it with some Bible reading. So, before I get into that, though, I'm realizing I might have to stop calling it Wednesdays in the Word before long. Because I just, after doing this, which I really should have done this before, but so I looked up how many chapters are in the Bible to just remind myself. And yeah, there's a lot. So, if I keep only doing one per week, it would take me nearly 23 years. And I'm not sure I want to spend that long just getting through the Bible. So, at some point, I will probably want to increase my output of these videos, but I'm not entirely sure how much and to what extent. Because the thing is, even if I got to a point where I was pumping out 5 of these a week, every day, Monday through Friday, it would still take 4.5 years. So, like, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I'm just gonna keep at this. I will do at least one per week. That's the bare minimum. But I'm hoping at some point maybe I'll do a little more than that. Anyway, okay, so now let's actually dig into the Bible here. We are on, I believe, Genesis chapter 10. Yes, that is correct. So we have basically wrapped up everything that happened with Noah, and now we're gonna get into a little more genealogy stuff with his descendants and whatnot. So, chapter 10, verse 1. This is the account of the families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the 3 sons of Noah. Many children were born to them after the great flood. The descendants of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Or Tyrus. Man, this is one with a lot of names, and I apologize if I kind of butcher them. I'm doing my best here. Anyway, verse 3. The descendants of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The descendants of Javan. Okay, so it's going through at least a couple of different sons of Japheths, and not just like a single, not just one single representative from each generation here. Anyway, verse 4. The descendants of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Rodanim. Their descendants became the seafaring peoples that spread out to various lands, each identified by its own language, clan, and national identity. So, backtrack a little bit to the previous chapter and, the curse on Kanan and whatnot. As we're seeing here, some of the descendants of Noah's sons essentially became the namesakes of various regions, nations, peoples. And so Canaan being cursed becomes significant in that kind of way. But, in other news, we see here that some of Japheth's sons and their descendants basically, like it said, became seafaring people. And Tarshish, you will definitely hear at some points. Kittim also sounded a bit familiar as a possible name of a place within the Bible. But anyway, moving along. Verse 6. The descendants of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Kanan. And we discussed Kanan a little bit already. Verse 7, the descendants of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, I don't know, and Sabtika. There's so many different ways that some of these could be pronounced. Anyway, the descendants of Rama were Sheba and Dedan. Cush was also the ancestor of Nimrod, who was the first heroic warrior on Earth. Since he was the greatest hunter in the world, his name became proverbial. Yeah, not typically what we've thought of when calling someone Nimrod, but anyway, that's not even the end of that particular verse. So let me backtrack to the start of verse 9. Since he was the greatest hunter in the world, he became proverbial. People would say, this man is like Nimrod, the greatest hunter in the world. He built his kingdom in the land of Babylonia, with the cities of Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. From there he expanded territory to Assyria, building the cities of Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, there's a comma there, Kala, and Resen, the great city located between Nineveh and Kala. Yeah, so it's interesting noting that so far Ham's descendants definitely seem to have done much more significant things than Japheth's. But I don't know. I mean, Ham himself was not the one that was cursed. It was only Kanan. So anyway, yeah. Nimrod. Bet you didn't know that about Nimrod. If you haven't really read the Bible and paid much attention to it. I don't know. It makes me wonder when the heck calling someone Nimrod became almost like synonymous with calling them stupid. Or at least that's the impression that I got. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the few times that I seem to recall hearing someone use Nimrod as, you know, a descriptive name for someone else, it was not a good thing. Anyway, but it turns out Nimrod apparently had a lot of land and did a lot of conquering and stuff. Anyway, okay, carrying on. Verse 13, we are still on Ham's descendants, by the way. Mizraim was the ancestor of the Luddites, Anamites, Lehabites, Naphtuhites. Man, some of these are really weird to pronounce. Anyway, Pathrusites, Casluhites, and the Caphtorites, from whom the Philistines came. Okay, lots of G's. Like, how many 3-consonant names do you need to have? Come on. But anyway, alright. Verse 15. Canan's oldest son was Sidon, ancestor of the Sidonians. Unsurprisingly. Kanan was also the ancestor of the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. I had to double check on Zemarites because I was like, wait, did I read that right? Yes, anyway. The Canaanite clans eventually spread out, and the territory of Canaan extended from Sidon in the north to Gerar and Gaza in the south, and east as far as Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim near Lasha. These were the descendants of Ham, identified by clan, language, territory, and national identity. So yeah, okay, so a lot of those places end up being mentioned frequently in later sections of the Bible. Even just those particular peoples, like, the reason I was able to breeze through some of those earlier, peoples that Kanan was the ancestor of, is because they come up quite a bit. Like, especially the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, not so much Girgashites, Hivites, Sinites, sorta, but anyway. Yeah, so this chapter, in addition to, being a genealogy regarding, Noah's sons and their descendants, also serves as a introduction to, hey, here are a lot of names that you're going to see later, because these people who were descendants of Noah's sons wound up, again, being the namesakes, essentially, of these various places and peoples. So anyway, now we get into Shem's descendants in verse 21. Sons were also born to Shem, the older brother of Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the descendants of Eber. The descendants of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. Man, that one name. The descendants of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gaither, and Mash. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah the father of Eber. Wasn't there already an Eber mentioned? I don't know. Anyway, Eber had two sons. The first was named Peleg, which means division. For during his lifetime, the people of the world were divided into different language groups. His brother's name was Joktan. Or, there were actually sometimes in the Bible, especially when, Jewish is the language used, where, like, we might read a J, but it might actually be pronounced more like a Y. Like, for example, the name Joshua, as we might read it, in Hebrew was far more commonly Yeshua. But anyway, I digress. The question there is it pronounced Joktan or like Yoktan? Anyway. Joktan was the ancestor of Almadad, Sheleph, Hazarmaveth. I'm trying to make sure that I read these somewhat carefully as I'm pronouncing them. Yeah, Hazarmaveth. Yeah, okay. Jera, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. So all of those were Joktan's descendants. Anyway, all these were descendants of Joktan. Wow. Okay, should have just... the territory they occupied extended from Mesha all the way to Sephar in the eastern mountains. These were the descendants of Shem, identified by clan, language, territory, and national identity. So, the fact that it's adding that little sentence at the end of each subsection talking about the descendants of Noah's sons just kind of keeps driving home that point that I'm talking about, where it's like, hey, these are important names and people to know because they will be brought up later, quite likely. So yeah, it said in like the first verse that Noah's sons had lots of descendants, and gosh darn it, it seems like that was right. Anyway, wrapping it up, verse 32. These are the clans that descended from Noah's sons, arranged by nation according to their lines of descent. All the nations of the earth descended from these clans after the great flood. So again, like, all these people came from Noah and his sons. And what it doesn't get into there, though, that I find interesting and certainly different from the previous genealogy, was that this one doesn't really specify whether, you know, certain descendants, like, it doesn't specify the generations quite as much, it seems. So, like, is it assumed that all those names in verse 26 in that section, you know, Joktan's descendants, is it assumed that all of those were supposed to be one generation, or are those various generations and it's just not delineating them as such? I really would be interested to know more about that, but again, not necessarily super important. I'm actually looking ahead a little bit, and it seems like it might get into some of that later. But yeah, so either each one of Noah's sons just had a ton of sons in their own in one generation, or these are all various generations descended from them, and it mentions them, you know, it lists them out as such in part because, you know, these were the namesakes of different people groups, tribes, you might call them, nations, lands, cities, a whole bunch of rather important things like that, that really the you know, the Israelites, God's people, probably would have known, and those names and the places associated with those names and the people associated with those names would have been far more obvious to the initial readers of Genesis. But it's, again, it's something to take note of due to, you know, probably being important and mentioned later on in the Bible. So, anyway, that really does it for chapter 10. Chapter 11 seems a little bit more varied in content. But anyway, we'll get there when we get there. And again, we'll see how things go with pumping out more of these in the future. I don't know, we'll have to see. Maybe if and when the weather gets a bit better, I don't know. I have an idea of a way that I could speed up the process, but I don't know how much I would really want to do that and how viable that might be. I don't know. Anyway, so I have some thoughts. We'll see where things go, is the short version of that. Anyway, if you're looking to keep up with this, especially given the uncertainty of how often and when exactly I may end up posting these in the future, make sure you subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so you'll get updates and you'll know when I post these, along with any other videos that I put out there. And of course, if you want more information on my social media pages and how to find, follow, interact, all that good stuff, just look down in the description for more info there. And of course, leave comments down below all that with any thoughts that you have. If you have any advice on how to pronounce those names, or whatever thoughts that you have, honestly, just let me know down below. So that's it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video, the next chapter at least. But until next time, stay cool, people.